Welcome to the Mind Sensei podcast. I'm your host, Peter Taz, and I'll be taking you on a journey to the world of martial arts and introduce listeners to some of the most aspiring and knowledgeable practitioners from around the world. Whether you're a seasoned martial artist or a curious beginner, or just enjoy hearing a great story, the Mind Sensei podcast Down Under has something for everyone. So tune in, sit back, and let us take you on a journey through the world in martial arts. So welcome to another exciting episode of the Mind Sensei podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Mr. Jason Arnold, karate practitioner from Canada, 7th degree black belt, recognized as senior professor in the international organization. He has extensive expertise in Ed Parker's American Kempo, amongst other martial arts. And Mr. Arnold's trained numerous students blending traditional Kempo techniques with modern art and Eastern stick work. So welcome to the Mind Sensei podcast, Mr. Jason Arnold.
Thank you, Peter. Been a long time since we've chatted.
In a long time between drinks, definitely. Let's start the party and kick it off with what inspired you to start practicing and how'd you get started in the martial art?
I was 8 years old, and it wasn't a typical thing where I was bullied or anything like that. My brother basically said, "You got a big mouth and you better learn to back it up." How I got started, to be honest. So there was nothing, it just always yapping back and forth. And he's like, "You better learn to train because you're a small guy. So you either learn to stand up for yourself or you're going to take a lot of shit." So that's what happened. Started when I was 8. I trained for probably 2 years. I stopped for about 6 to 8 months to play baseball, and then I've done it ever since.
What was that like? That
1983, November of 83.
And what was the first school that you went to? And tell us about that journey and your first instructor.
So my first school was at Universal Academy of Martial Arts, and then it switched over to Olympic Karate, and that was with Joe Foster out of Canada. I was there for many years, and at one point, my brother opened his own studio, I think around 86 or 87, and I went and taught at his place for a while. And then he decided to go back to full-time work. So he closed the school, and then I went back to the main school. But I'm 15 years.
Or your brother opened it?
Brother. No, Joe was our teacher, but my brother Tim was one of his top students. He was a second black belt, and then he opened his own studio.
But
that was Kempo as well. But in the beginning, it actually was Trey Kempo. And then Joe came across Parker. And at the same time, he was basically directed to train with Joe Colonzo over time because of the East Coast proximity. But when Mr. Parker came and did the seminar and did a camp, and basically he said, at the end of all your techniques, for now, just do a hammer fist scoop kick. So almost every single technique we did was a hammer fist scoop kick, like you would do the end of clutching feathers type of thing. So we did that with all the techniques that you could think of. And then as more times he's seen Mr. Parker, the more our system changed. I know at that time is when Panther tapes came out, and he had all the Larry Tatum tapes. So I'm sure there was some cross-pollination there too. But I know he worked with Joe Blonzo quite a bit, and then Mr. Parker himself.
so where did your journey take you from there? For years, how far did you get with him, with Joe Foster?
I got to first degree with Joe, and then at some point I opened my own studio. And then this was probably around 93, maybe 94. And so when I started doing my own studio, I had one of my students at the time. He brought in a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, just moved in from California area. And he was also under the Machados doing the BJJ. So he was Filipino as well. So the one day we were doing some grappling, and my buddy Brandon was probably around, I would say he probably worked with us for about 3 years. And then he said, "You should check out this guy, Paul Runak," and he showed me a video of him doing some of the Filipino stuff. And I'd already had some stick experience from Kempo, right? Because I was already a black belt. And then I was like, wow, that's totally different than what we do. So I checked it out. And then I went to Toronto and I was looking for a guy that went by the name of Makoto Kabiyama, and I couldn't find him. But when I was in Toronto, I was at a store called Warriors, where they used to do martial arts supplies. And basically, there was a magazine there that was called Full Contact. And it was a magazine that had basically all the eclectic arts, like the Southeast Asian arts and Filipino arts and all the ones that are off the beat path. So I got looking through the magazine, and one of the advertisements, I still have the magazine actually, and the Gary Hartzell's Jeet Kune Do Grappling Association. And so there was a guy that was close to my house. So I phoned him up and I said, "Hey, you mind if I come out and try a class or whatever?" Because I was at the point where at our school, people were more concerned with how many times they could tie their belt to make it look white than actually train. And I loved the guys that were my classmates and they worked hard, but for school could only take you to a certain point, right? Because if you're already one of the top guys in your school, how are you going to get better if you don't train with people that are better than you at different things? So I took myself out of my comfort zone and I went and seen Paul Irish from JKD, who's a good friend of mine. And basically, he's the one that got me cross training and looking at different forms of FMA and BJJ and some Sambo and some shoot wrestling and anything that was through the Larry Hartzell Japan Jeet Kune Do Grappling Association. Until I was with Irish for probably about 5 years. And then in the meantime, I met Tim Hartman. He happened to be in town doing a seminar and we got along really great. And first and foremost, he was my friend and then he became my teacher. And then it had more structure, what Modern Arnis did than the JKD, because when you do Jeet Kune Do, you're getting concepts of each thing. Whereas Modern Arnis was like, it had basically small circle jiu-jitsu, some judo, but it was very structured on the way Tim did it. He had belt cards and there was certain things, whereas with the JKD, it was kind of like the stick, 1 month of grappling, 1 month of knife, that type of thing, right? Which I like, but it was very cyclical. And so Irish made me very good at working range and doing cross training and being able to adapt. It's even more structured. And so in the beginning, I thought this is really basic and easy to learn and easy to get a black belt. But until you actually get into it for a long time and you realize it's very in depth. So it would be the epitome of sophisticated basics, right? Because you look at just a basic move, and I got that, but you have to really work the timing and the different aspects. You got to be in it for a long time to really get the essence of it. And then through Tim Hartman, I've been with him since I think 95 or 6. I thought it'll be 30 years this year anyways. And so I hold a fifth black in Modern Arnis under Tim Hartman. And so basically we did seminars. He introduced me to Wally J and George Stillman and Dr. Mongji and Bondo. So Tim always had an open mind and we would just say, "Hey, let's go here and train." Or if he was doing seminars, wherever he was going, I would just basically drive to Buffalo, hook up with him, and then he liked to drive. So I just basically was his co-pilot a lot of the time. And then at some point, I can't remember what year it was, but actually it was 99. And so I was talking to Ingmar and I said, we're looking at going over and seeing Remy in Germany. I go, would you be interested in doing something with us when I bring over my instructor, Tim? And he's like, "What? I'll be in Denmark at Klaus Peterson, AKKS. You bet the speaker would be at, right?" So during that time, so I got a hold of Hartman and I said, "Ingmar, hold on." I got a hold of Hartman. I said, "Hey, before we go to Germany, do you want to go to Denmark?" He's like, "Yeah, sure. So let's go to Denmark." So then we went to Denmark. And after Denmark, we took a bus over to Sweden. And then we went from Sweden. Then we flew to Frankfurt, did a Remy Prace's camp there. And then from there, we drove to Frankfurt, or Hamburg, sorry. And we taught 2 seminars there. So I taught Tempo at a JKD school. And then he taught Modern Arnis at a Kempo school. It was kind of interesting that I was teaching his art. He was at our, pretty cool. And then on the way back, I was getting ready to go home. Speakman had canceled on a camp at Mike in Philadelphia. So I was just getting ready to leave. And then Hartman said, you feel like going down to Cappy's and covering for speaker? And I was like, well, made a phone call home, said I'll be home in another 4 days. And we'd already been gone for almost 2 weeks. I said, what's another 4 days? So basically, I hopped in the vehicle with him. We went down to Philly, and then I met a bunch of different guys down there, just opened a lot of doors. And in the process, I crossed paths with Huck at Cappy's camps, from Trejo through, and he was doing the WKK thing. So I've crossed paths with quite a few of the seniors. And that's pretty much how I got into cross training and got into modern RD. And then recently, in the last 10 years, I've done Collie Sealot Evolution through Jeff Espino. That's what I'm grading for tomorrow for my third block. Pretty much basic history.
So did you know, if you trained at Joe Foster's, you know Jamie Seabrook, right?
Jamie Seabrook trained.
Mike Donnan, sorry.
Jamie came over to our school. He did 1 or 2 classes. And then he went back to doing the thing at Donovan. But I know Jamie, we've crossed paths many times over the years. He does Kempo his way. I do Kempo my way. We definitely had a different flavor. And when you watch us move, we definitely move different. So he's a good practitioner. He's pretty dedicated with his students. He's consistent. But there's a lot of guys that have come and gone. But he's always been consistent.
How did you get involved with Huck Barnes then? Because when I met you, you always...
So I got involved with Huck by going down to Cappy's camps. Also, a guy named Pat McGuire used to bring Huck into Canada. So I would train when Huck came to Canada. At some point in time, I was going through a separation/divorce. And I was talking to Ingmar. And I actually got introduced to Ingmar from Foster. I went over to Ingmar's as a black belt. He was a brown belt at the time. And Joe was doing some lessons for him and whatnot. And then I taught some tournament karate to some of his guys. So that opened the door there, and that's how I got Ingmar. So basically, I'd already known Huck. At the time, I think Ingmar was working with Graham, if I'm not mistaken. And then he connected with Huck over time. For sure, when he was in the state, maybe the Dappy camp or whatever, but I can't remember exactly how they connected, solidified the training-teacher relationship. So I've already crossed paths with Huck from Cappy camps. Hartman used to bring him in too. We did the bullwhip. We did revising on the gun techniques. We did nice stuff. I always got along with Huck off the mats because we'd talk knives or we'd talk whips or just generally guys shoot the shit thing. I never went after the patch, and I'd always consider him my teacher when it came to Kempo because he taught me a lot about the principles and rules of motion, but he also taught me phrases that made me a better teacher and taught me what to look for. And I'd ask him a question and he'd be like, the answer to this. And I'm like, I want you to confirm the answer. And he was, why? Did you already know the answer? Well, I did as many things as you can. And the next time you see me. So it was basically, at one point in time, I was going through a separation, and then Ingmar said, why don't you come over to Sweden and run in the mid-class? So it was green belts, and he had problems getting some quality control in the in-between belts. So he had me run those, and then I did some of the private school teaching. So under his license, I was able to teach high school with Ed. I taught them American football. Had a great time there, and I missed my time with Ingmar and our relationship, and we had a bit of a falling out. And I would say it was most of my fault, but I don't have any hard feelings anymore or anything like that. We were good friends, and I still value our friendship. I don't talk to him as much as I should, but anyways, when I was over there, he would bring Huck over, and so he would bring Huck for a few weeks at a time. And so we got him for private training. So I'd get him 4 hours in the morning and Ingmar would get him 4 hours in the afternoon because I was covering the high school classes and then vice versa, right? And then because Ingmar usually had the camp, so now I got him at the camp, got him for private. Then when everybody got together with Panos from Greece and Peter Woods from England and stuff, we would all get together at the instructor camp. And so I seen Huck more in the time that I was in Sweden than I did when he was in North America. And so when I moved to Sweden, I said, when I come back from Sweden, I'm going to make sure that I have the system down the best I possibly can. And so I basically broke every technique down from what I originally learned. And by working with Ingmar's advanced classes, and Ingmar helped me as well, like saying it neutral bow and just stuff like that over time. And just being in that environment out when everybody else had their families and they were doing like this and that, all I did was train. I basically slept at the dojo and I trained, and trained. And so it wasn't time wasted by any means. But it took the ability to teach you certain things. And then didn't need him to tell me everything. He gave me certain keys for movement and principles and how to look at things. And then I just started figuring stuff out, right? And I mean, there's going to be some stuff that there's maybe a discrepancy or whatever, but generally speaking, it's funny. I'll tell you a funny story. One time we were at a camp and I'm doing a technique the way Huck wants it. And so I got it down and then I'm like, okay, started doing it a little bit, my flavor without changing it a lot, but very specific. And they comes by and he's like, do it my way. And so I go back doing it his way. And then he comes around again. He's like, God damn it. I told you to do it my way. And I said, with all due respect, Mr. Plattis, I was like, the guy that's blocking the punch coming at my face. And he turned out, looked at me and goes, fair enough. And then he walked away. And after that, we had a different relationship because he knew that I didn't have to be babysat. I didn't need to ask him every single question. And some people, they need that, but I didn't. I'd already had temple from a few different sources, and I had some comparison. Plus, I had the Filipino martial arts. Plus, I had the JKD when I started training. But what I didn't have was all the whys and the forms, and he is very good at teaching the verbiage behind it, like feel, bend the buckle, establish the base, break the height, like that. Made me a better teacher, 100%. Right. So when I do Kempo, I still try to give him a lot of the credit for that. Relationship with Mrs. C is she's like my Kempo mom. She's the one who graded me for my black belt.
At Doreen Cogliandro, right?
So I've always had a relationship with her that I don't necessarily do private lessons with her all the time, but whenever she's gives seminars and whatnot, and she's doing private lessons with a buddy Dave or a couple of the other guys, I'll hop in and do that stuff, right? So she's been, I consider her my teacher in Kempo. Like I lose my cool and I'm ready to jump across the table and throttle a guy in the middle of a meeting. She was the one to be like, well, you should look at it from this perspective. And it's like the Peter taught her the balance position, right? So I have a lot of respect for Mrs. C for sure. And always treated me very well. Yeah, she's very diplomatic, but I turn it on when she needs to. And basically, I got to the point where I didn't need a lineage. I wanted to work around people that I enjoyed being around. And that's how I ended up hooking up with Francisco Vigaro's group at one point. And it was good for a bit. And as soon as I went to his group, I was like, I don't want to move like you. You know, to bring stuff to the group to broaden people's horizons stuff. I said, but you respect the way he moves. He's like a surgeon when he does his Kempo, right? I have a lot of respect for him as well as a Kempoist, right? And I think a lot of times in Kempo, people become, they're martial artists, but they actually become stylists. They've chosen the style, right? And that's not what I would consider an artist. An artist is somebody that, to a certain point, they have so many colors on their palette that they can make their own pictures. But when you do something exactly the way someone showed you 5 years from now, you're becoming a stylist, not an artist, right?
You're starting to become a traditionalist.
And you don't have to be rude and negative and confrontational if you want to do Kempo a little bit different. That's why when I make a video, I say, this is my perspective. I don't care if you have your perspective. I don't care if you say you lost your neutral bow when you're in the middle of the technique. It's like, okay, well, and get in a real fight and you see how many times you hit a neutral bow, right? So I'm working with my training partners, a world champion kickboxer. When I tell him to throw a punch at me, it's not a Kempo punch. It's a punch, right? Like he doesn't aim to miss. It's not just lobbing it out there. He's got some speed and intent behind it when I tell him to throw a punch at me. So,
Well, they have that saying in Kempo, it's not right, it's who's left standing. because it doesn't matter in the end. If you watch Kempo in the street, it's ugly, but you would have been the last person standing, right?
I've never seen, this might be controversial, but I've never seen Mr. Parker do techniques. I went, oh man, that looks beautiful. It looked devastating. It looked powerful, right? It looked like he would rip your head off and shove it in places, something you don't want it, but it didn't look pretty. You never went, oh my God, he had a beautiful stance there, right? Even Trejo, when you watch him do stuff, or you watch the Budweiser team when they used to do their demonstration, it wasn't picture perfect, but it's not supposed to be, right? So many times you'll go and do a technique on a guy. I was doing a demo the other night, about 3 weeks ago. We were doing a demonstration, and my buddy Brad doesn't know Kempo, right? And I'm doing a technique, and all of a sudden he starts falling, and it's dark because it was at this gala and charity event. So it was on a dance floor, and the dance floor was slippery. So as soon as he starts falling, oh crap, I got to get behind him with backbreaker and cover him because it's dark, and he was ready to the pavement. And that was a good example of how to move on the fly without thinking, and being able to do the footwork, the backbreaker, got me behind him quick, right? And I didn't even think about it. It was just like autopilot.
I think if you've got a different perspective on things, like after you've been around the merry-go-round 5, 6 different times, different merry-go-rounds, different stages of the merry-go-rounds build, there's more than one way to do something. But what I really love is the different things I learnt about the merry-go-round through that journey, and different perspectives, like you said, you can bring from other places to it.
She said it best one time. We were talking, and she was, every technique is a lesson. And she said, you can do 100 things to make it work, and you can also do 100 things to make it not work from the other perspective, right? So it's just, I think now in my journey, 43 years doing Kempo, and basically I come to the point where I figured out my why. And so when I'm watching someone train, I'm like, why are you training? So Dr. G, and through my association with Tim Hartman, I got to meet Dr. G and talk to him. And we got a lot of teaching methodologies from him as well. And he always says there's combatics, there's athletic, and there's aesthetic. And when you see a technique, you can decide what category you want to put that in, and then it gives it back. So once you can put it into a certain category, and then you figure out why the person's training, it gives a different perspective. So I'm not always about, will this work in a fight for real? Well, if the guy's got PTSD and he's already been in Vietnam or something like that, maybe he's just training and doing forms because he needs that moving meditation, right? He's already probably shot people or whatever. You have to know why someone's training, and then you can guide them properly. So when people ask me, I'm like, man, I don't have all the answers, but I know a lot of people and I could probably find out the answer. But the other part is I try to be lighthouse, right? And so I'm just basically teaching people how to navigate.
Right. I get some amazing messages and phone calls and different emails over the time. And sometimes we're just there to make a difference in someone's life. You don't have to be the Kempo badass that can rip people to shreds. I think I mentioned it with my instructor, Tony Angus, on his interview. I said, I look at it on a violent scale. Who are you teaching? Said, what are they there for? What's their violent scale? So there's no use teaching someone a 10 scale when they're there for a 0 or a 1 to do from kata and get fit.
Yep, 100%. And the thing is that when I do my personal training with my client, every one of them does martial arts whether they want to or not. So for instance, the one day I was doing lunges with a guy, and the guy goes, why do you do so many goddamn lunges? And I'm like, really want to know the reason? You stand right there. I went and grabbed a stick. Like, I'm going to swing the stick at your head, and we're going to see what you do. And I didn't even give him a chance to think. I just swung it, and I didn't pull it either. Committed. And he did a lunge and went to the side, and then you just seen the light bulb go off. He goes, oh, you're teaching me martial arts, and I didn't even know. I said, exactly. I'm teaching you exercise with a purpose.
At a Miyagi moment.
he had a big Miyagi moment. Another moment was, like, guy was, he's a physicist, but he's an ex-professor. Well, I shouldn't say ex-professor. He's a retired professor of vibrational studies. And so I was doing stick work with him, and I'd swing at him and he would block it, and you would hear, that means he's not holding the stick really tight, right? And so I'd do it again, and I go, "Gotta hold your stick tighter." And he goes, "Why?" Because of blah, 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 blah. He goes off on his tangent, right? Because of all of his technical terms. And I'm like, "This is the reason why. Hold the stick." So he holds the stick. I go, "Hack it." Flies right out of his hand. I go, "That's why." And he goes, so I've had a lot of those moments where people are like, "Oh, you're teaching me a lot of stuff, but I didn't even realize it." I'm like, "Yes, I am." Right? Someone says, "Oh, I want to do knife work." And I'm like, "Well, let's work with the stick." Because I don't want people learning. Like, I'm not a big proponent or mate. Anybody that's teaching Form 8 and doing it online and showing people that stuff, that's going to jail for 'em, right? You got two weapons, he's empty-handed, you're going to jail, right? But anyhow, so I can find a way to give them what they want, but still give them what they need without them realizing that I actually have decided what I'm already going to teach them.
I think Mingman put it well, and he said, you got to teach to their level of education as well. So some people want to do just high, junior high, college, university, doctorate, professor. And I said, well, the issue is, because putting my like, we want everyone to get it to the highest level of whatever they can achieve. And I said, not everyone wants to go to high school. Some just want to stay junior high. Some don't have the capacity to watch. No, not everyone's a watchmaker. Being so passionate about sharing it and all the rest. I said, not everyone have people that are, you throw it and what you think they're going to absorb, depending on what the size of their sponge is.
Funny, Dr. Huck one time, and I mentioned, I was like, "You train Tatum up to a certain level." He was like, "He knows everything that you taught him." And he's like, and I go, "Why doesn't he do it the way we do it?" And he goes, "Because we're fishing from the same pond." And that's what I went, that would make sense. So he changed the way he does his Kempo. And it's funny, people say, "Oh, wow, Tatum's never been in a real fight and he doesn't spar and all this other stuff." Well, for one, he's been in Vietnam, so he knows about combat. And right. Not that I'm a huge proponent, but I look at it for people at his age doing it at that level still. And he's constantly giving different ideas on how to train Tempo or anything thing in a different light. And then I love the way Huck does stuff. I like the fact that he has that whole elephant in the barn thing, if you've ever heard that story. And so,
And I have to share that story now. Let's run that story for our listeners.
all right. So one day I was at Inglar's and I'm doing a technique and the fix your toe. And so I'm doing the technique and it was fix your toe. And so I fixed my toe, doing the technique, and it must have sneaked out a little bit. And he goes, "Hold on a second." He gets up, got his cowboy boots on, and kicks me in the ass. And he goes, "God damn it, fix your toe." And I go, "What's the big deal?" He goes, "Oh, you want to know what the big deal is?" He goes, "You ever hear about the elephant in the barn?" And I'm like, "No, is this some Southern thing?" He goes, "Let me tell you about the elephant in the barn." He goes, "You go into a barn," he goes, "you're looking for an elephant, you'll find him." I was like, "What's your point? You go into a barn?" He goes, "You're looking for a cow. You might have to go around the corner, but you'll find him." He goes, "You go into a barn and you're looking for a mouse." He goes, "You might have to go around in the hay, but you'll find him." He goes, "And then there's the needle in the haystack." So he goes, "So that little toe movement to you, you think that's a needle in the haystack?" He goes, "That's an elephant in the barn to me." I was like, never forgot that. That was years ago he told me that. So when you think it's not a big deal because you don't know what you don't know, and it's his wisdom looking at you, I'm like, because I was pretty rebellious, still am in a way. I'll question them, and they're my seniors, and I don't do it in a rude way, but I'm like, you know what? I'm the guy doing this. I'm driving the car, feet, right? You're watching from the passenger seat. You're teaching me how to do it, but eventually I'm going to find my way. But the fact that he thinks that little movement was a huge deal and I didn't, with that story, gave me a different perspective. So now my attention to detail is a lot higher. And then through doing Kali Sea Lot, it has a whole different flavor. The movements are the same, but it definitely has a different feel, right? But I do give a lot of credit to Ingmar, his school, Christian, Diaz, all the seniors that were there back in the day. We spent a lot of time banging on each other and talking about the techniques and analyzing them. And then Ingmar had his whole library of all the different privates and stuff that we always watched. I don't regret spending the time there and really getting the system down. I'm sure I'm probably rusty in a lot of the stuff because I spent so much time. Here's the thing. I'll give you an example today. So my college Sea Lot teacher, Jeff, says, how many patterns do you know? And I was 154. And then when he was walking away, I said, you know what? I changed my mind. I said, there's probably about 5, maybe less than that. I said, mostly you're going to find crossing talum and 5. So that's pretty much it, right? Because if you understand cross the center line, take something with you, everything is like a Sinawali pattern. And eventually you're going to get to the opposing line on the outside at some point. Whether you do an bypass, underpass, whatever you're doing, you're going to hit those two things. So when I realized that a lot of people when they learn Kempo, they're like, either this technique, it's all the same technique, right? If you really break down the move, the gun techniques are all the same. The knife techniques are all the same. If you really break them down. So I think the thing that I learned from training with Huck was that I was looking for patterns, right? Not just family groupings, but patterns. So he does the family grouping thing, the tip technique, front to front, back to front, that type of thing. Mrs. C said to me, she goes, by watching your move and the way you analyze stuff, she goes, most people learn by touch or sight or sound. She goes, you learn by shape. And I'm like, you know what? She's right. I do learn by shape. When I'm moving, I'm seeing triangles and I'm seeing where I take away 2 points of the triangle and stuff like that. And that helped me with my Sea Lot, helps me with either grappling, helps me with all that type of stuff. That's why it's easy to cross train in different systems because I have that understanding of the triangle. You might say whether it's based on the shoulders and the groin or the hips and the head, or based on your footwork. When we're doing the lentil walk, when you move, he moves type of thing, and that type of stuff. So see shapes for sure. One thing that boss taught me years ago, he said that circles go in sync, they go out of sync, and they overlap. That's one thing that he did teach me that I took with me all the way through my training, even when I was training Buck and different stuff. So that was one. There's been some pivotal moments where I've learned something and went, wow. And that really took my training to the next level. You never know when that moment's going to come out.
I think that also comes from training with a lot of different people. Your instructor has trained with a lot of people and he can only give you what he's been given and he understands. So if he's not well-traveled, hasn't trained with a lot, and his instructor didn't have the information, that's all you're going to end up with. But if you get out and a little bit like yourself, I question, and that's how I was brought up, question it. And with some of the people we dealt with, were with John Van Mike in Sydney, he was all about it had to work. He didn't care. Are you still standing at the end of it? And then everything was, and they threw it at you. If you didn't block, you got punched in the mouth and you got clobbered and that ain't going to work. And so you take that mindset, and a lot of the schools don't have that as written techniques and all this sort of stuff. Another time it is, you've got grappling that's challenging everything because that hasn't been seen before. And that's trying to cat amongst the pigeons. So
Listen, I did a seminar today and they recorded it for our college sea camp. And I was doing Hubud and I did the Hubud drill into a tie-up. And then the guy goes to do the Thai boxing tie-up to you. And he goes to fire the knee. So you block the first knee and then the second knee, he does like a secondary knee. And he takes you down to the ground. So now it put me in bowing to Buddha. So I showed the guys how to do the first part of bowing to Buddha, then the 5-on-2. And then I did the takedown out of Dance of Death and then showed the leg break in. And so the whole thing was, where we do our Kali Sea Lot, we have this hand motion, and at the end we go like this, right? So the whole theme of my seminar was this. I said, today I'm going to teach you guys this. So the first part was to show it this way. Then the next part, we were doing it, and the guy goes to tackle you, and he drives you backwards, but you don't go down to the ground. That's when I showed them striking serpent set. And these are all Kali Sealot guys. And even my instructor was like, wow, I see the way you're putting your own spin on Kempo. I'm not changing the techniques. I'm changing the methodology and how I present the technique. So that's how I get a lot of seminars and stuff, is because people are like, there's not a whole lot of guys, I shouldn't say guys, but people that know an entire Filipino system and Kempo, like Zach does for sure. There's other people like Josh Ryder does, because he trains with Zach, right? But if there's certain people that know bits and pieces, and JKD really doesn't count because they do concepts. They don't learn an entire system from start, right? They take what Guru Dan likes, and then if they like that system, then they go and find the senior in that system, and then they learn that. So whether they did Bill Abreu or they did Ed Luque, my instructor trained with Ed Luque quite a bit. So some of the stuff that we do, our elbow stuff, is very long Sinawali like, and I've never seen anybody move the same way as my teacher. So to get back to the topic, is there's not a lot of guys that have the same depth of knowledge in the Filipino martial art, definitely not in Canada, and Kempo to the level that I do. And that's why I get a lot of seminars and invites to go to places. And part of it is, I think, probably my teaching ability and my personality. I can zone in and tell whether that person learns by touch, sight, sound. And that's it. Watch myself teach on film not too long ago. I'm like, oh crap, I'm really serious when I teach. People have been on the floor with me most of the time. I'm cracking some jokes. I'm pretty mellow. Like, I know it's been a long time since you've been on the floor with me when I taught at Wonder Valley Camp. I'm a totally different martial artist now, but my teaching style is still the same. I just have more knowledge about what I'm doing. A long time. Actually longer, 2007, I think it was. 2009. That's my Moss 2007. That was the last time I was there. That's why I really wanted to go to this one if I could swing it. It's not totally off the books, but I don't think I'll be able to, just because opening at the store, and I got a lot of responsibilities here right now.
Well, I've got a pilgrimage planned, so where I'm coming out for 4 weeks, but we start in LA. I've got a week in LA, and I've got 1 day at Disney, take my goddaughter. But apart from that, I'm visiting, getting clapped around, visiting people for the whole week, different dojos. Then we're doing Graham's. Then going to Sacramento. I'm seeing Dave Kovar there. Then driving Boise, spending time with Sepulveda, shooting across to Oregon, spend time with Edmund, go up to just past Washington, spend a few days with Pick, then across to Seattle and spending time with AC, and then flying back to LA and then come home. So I'd try and maximize my pilgrimage now. I may contact a lot of people. Yes, a long flight. But I met a lot of the guys.
One of the guys that's at the camp right now came from Tahiti to train at our Kali Sealot camp. So I haven't seen Bruno in probably 6 years. It took him 2 days of traveling to get here. That dedication. That's the longest I've ever heard of anybody traveling. He's right in the middle of everything. I did a stopover in San Francisco, and then he flew from San Fran to Toronto, and then Toronto to London.
Yeah, that's crazy. The longest I've been is 36 hours. Like, that's the long, well, it's more than a day, but I was Melbourne to LA, that like 16, and at least quicker now, they got a newer plane. So I did the Melbourne to LA, spoke to the travel agent. She said, oh no, she gave me 2 hours in customs, which is not enough. It might be now because I've got all the electronic passports, and I had a connecting flight. She goes, oh no, I've given you an express pass. I kept saying, not enough time. She said, no, you'll be good. So even with the express pass, I did my homework. I looked at where my connecting flight was, because I was going to the San Antonio camp that Lee was running, Mr. Weblake, and meeting Graham and the boys there. So I had to fly LA to Houston to San Antonio. So I flew all the way to LA, went in the custom, come out 1.5 hours later. I looked at the furthest, was at gate 1, which is the furthest gate
Where you needed.
from where I was. And I was pretty fit. I went out, I'll run it. So I had my backpack on and my big bag, and I'm bolting down LA with like a freight train. I got there 20 minutes to spare. I was fine. And I wouldn't take my bag. because it was 19 minutes before, 9.5 minutes or some crap. Anyway, and then I had to wait there. There was a 4-hour layover to the next flight. Then they said, you can't make that one. The next one, we'll try and get you on. They finally got me on the next one, which was another 3 hours later. And then, but they took my bag straight on. I'm like, hang on, I got here 19 minutes before you wouldn't take my bag. Now, at 2 minutes and you're putting my bag underneath. Like, how does that work? Anyway, so I then flew from Bay to Houston to San Antonio. And I rang the guy, I said, don't wait for me. He's going to be a while. For 36 hours, I think, in the end, or all up it was by the time I landed. And they said, what do you want to do? Do you want to have a nap? I go, let's go get some rib and let's just punch on a bit. That's what I'm here for. Plenty of time to sleep when I hit the plane again. It's good time. Good travel stories. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about your journey. You started with Joe Foster in Canada at Universal, I think it was originally called. You got to your second, was it with Joe, up to your first? First, and then from there, where'd your other ranks come from, say in Kemper?
Second was from the WKK. Third was from the WKK. Fourth was from Trejo. Fifth was from Dennis Tostin's group through Dr. G's recommendation and some of the senior guys there. Sixth was through Big Rose group, and then seventh was through Mississippi. But from fourth to fifth was 10 years. From fifth to sixth was 12 years. And then from sixth to seventh was over 5.
I'm your host, Peter Taz, and you've tuned in to the Mind Sensei podcast from Down Under. We want to take a moment to thank all our listeners for tuning in to the Mind Sensei podcast. We appreciate your support and hope our show has been both informative and entertaining for you. If you haven't already done so, we would like to invite you to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we release new content and you'll have access to all of our past episodes. We also encourage you to visit our website at mindsensei.au where you can find additional resources related to martial arts. On our site you can read blog posts, videos and learn more about the guests we feature on our show. Finally, we'd like to thank our guests for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. Without their generosity, this podcast would not be possible. Thank you again for listening to the Mind Sensei podcast Down Under. We hope that you continue to join us on this journey through the world of martial arts.